All right, good morning, everyone. It is now 9 a.m., and that is the time that we are scheduled to start our meeting. Amy, do we have a quorum?
You do have a quorum.
That's exciting. So, welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to see everyone here today, and I'm also very excited for our meeting today. So, first off, let's do our member introductions. Hi, everyone. My name is Lillian Dejean. I am the chairperson of the YLF committee. Jill, would you like to go next? Oh, you're muted.
Hi, I'm Joe Hayno. I'm a member of the YLF committee and DDC member from Region 10.
Thank you, Jill. I'm happy to see you here today. And Liz, your block is next on my screen.
Hi, good morning. I'm Liz Gary. I'm a parent from Region 9, and I had asked to join this committee as I was familiar with YLF when it was back in 2005, 2006. So I don't have a whole lot of it. I just remember the experience, and I remember sitting on some of the meetings. And I apologize for not being in the last one as I was not aware of it. But anyway, thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Liz. We're happy to have you. Dylan.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Dylan Saunier, and I'm a member of the committee.
Thanks, Dylan. Miss Nicole.
I'm Nicole Flores. I am a parent, and I'm also the Executive Director of Families Helping Families of Acadiana.
Thank you. And last but not least, I think we have Chandra. If I'm pronouncing your name wrong, please let me know.
Good morning. No, you pronounced it correct. I am Chandra Stewart. I am program monitor with the council this morning.
Okay. Well, it's good to have you here. And so a couple housekeeping notes before we begin. So the documents that I sent out prior to this meeting were those Oklahoma YLF schedules. One was for a virtual format and one was for an in-person format, just so you can kind of get a grasp of what a YLF may look like day to day. I also sent typed up history of our YLF that we had from 2000 to 2005 from information that we have managed to gather over the past couple years. It's not comprehensive by any stretch, but that's what we were able to find out. And then lastly, Oklahoma YLF outcome report. And that essentially outlines the impact of Oklahoma's YLF. They do one every year. It's really neat to look at to see the delegates' knowledge of self-advocacy before the YLF and after, and also a couple other factors that went into it. So I just wanted to send that out to everyone because I thought those were really interesting supporting documents. Jill, I see that you have your hand raised.
I did not get any of this. I don't think I get, I've never, because last quarter I didn't get the documents you sent of either, but then after the committee, I definitely know I got an email from you, so my email is correct, and you definitely have the correct email address, and it's working, but I didn't get an email from you, Lil. Can someone send me those documents so I can?
Hey, Jill,
Yes.
I just emailed them to you.
Okay, great. What is? No, I think I live in the twilight zone because on my Amazon, I don't get any Amazon packages. I don't get anything.
Well, then you're missing out on a lot if you're missing your Amazon packages and YLF documents. Like, that's a problem. So thank you, Amy, for forwarding those documents.
You
Yeah.
didn't send it at 9:05. Wait. Okay, thank y'all.
No worries, Jill. Does anyone have any other comments or questions before we move on to our second housekeeping note? All right, cool. So the second thing that I wanted to share with the committee and everyone else who's attending is that I know I talk about Oklahoma a lot. I'm in love with Oklahoma, if you haven't already guessed. But they actually recently appointed 2 new members to their council. And these 2 members are actually youth. And so one 19-year-old and I believe one 20-year-old, both YLF delegates. So currently, Oklahoma's DD Council has 3 youth council members, which is phenomenal and likely a result of their YLF. Our council, after this next full council meeting, will have 0 youth representatives. So that just really emphasizes how important it is for us to get this YLF rolling. So the second thing on that's all for housekeeping. The second thing that we have is our approval of our July meeting summary. So would you mind pulling up that on the screen, Amy, our July meeting summary?
Oh, and definitely.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the summary?
Well, can y'all see me?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm on my email and I'm paying full attention to you, Lillian.
I don't doubt it, Jill. So we have a motion to approve. Now we need a second.
A second.
Thank you. So our July meeting summary is now approved. So now on to the official business of the meeting. I figured that for our second meeting, we could start developing our timeline because this will inform our committee meetings moving forward and what we're going to do. And so I've broken it down into a 3, 6, and 12-month timeline. And I figured it would be based from our formatting, scheduling, and planning lists from the first meeting, and also the handbook items. The handbook was linked in this agenda. So if you need that sent over again, I'd be happy to do that. But so moving forward, I think it'd be great to start with our 3-month goals. So our goals from this meeting to our next. So does anyone have any ideas for that?
I think for us to figure out when we'll meet, like how often per year would be something.
I thought it was deciding to meet quarterly alignment with our council meetings, like after this, if I remember from previous discussions, after this meeting, we will meet in alignment of our January DD council meetings.
I think you're right, Jill. I think previously we did decide to meet quarterly. So
And maybe just to narrow that down, like when, like dates maybe.
Okay. So I think if Jill and I are recalling correctly, it would be in alignment with our quarterly council meetings.
Mhm.
So I think, aren't those scheduled like a year in advance, maybe?
And they're scheduled like 5 years in. Wait, hold on.
Yes,
Oh,
they're scheduled pretty far out.
Okay.
it's like the third, whatever the third Thursday in January would be our January full council meeting, right, Miss Amy? Oh shoot!
Let's see. Let me find the date really quick. The January date.
Thank you. So in the meantime, I've pulled up that list of formatting, planning, scheduling, to-dos that we came up with at our last meeting. So I can send that link in the chat. So everyone has access to it. So this is our to-dos that we came up with last time, and now we need to figure out how to schedule this into a 3, 6, 12, 24-month timeline, because for, like, Liz, I know you weren't present at the last meeting. We kind of predicted that this process will take about 2-ish years to plan a quality YLF.
Lillian, the January council dates are set for the 19th and 20th.
Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and maybe we can pull up a fresh document and share it on the screen so we can start narrowing down when all these things will occur.
Sorry, and where's my
So
message?
if we could put like 3, 6, 12, 24-month timeline.
So Lillian, this is Liz. Can I talk for a second?
Yeah.
So what your goal for the 24 months is that at the end of that period is when you would actually have the YLF forum and that thing. So that's why you're asking, let's break it down. So the goal is from now until then to plan for that forum, what it looks like, where it would be, how we would get the funding. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Exactly. And so really we have that list from the first meeting that I sent in the chat that's within the minutes, and then also that handbook that the National Association for YLFs has provided online. I know that handbook is slightly outdated, but that's the one that everyone still utilizes so far. And in that handbook, actually, it stated that it advised us that we should set a date and a location 1 year prior to our first YLF. So I think we can probably put that like date and location under that 12-month category to start us off. And Jill, do you have your hand raised? Oh, you were just stretching. Okay. So we also have things such as like finalization of topics, our decided age range for our delegates. I think those two things can probably happen a little bit earlier on. What do you guys think? Y'all, I need some input here. I can't just be like doing my Darth Vader breathing over here all by myself. Okay. So I'll put that handbook in the chat, Liz.
And I was trying to pull like from the national book too. I did see those two things, like the 1 year out would be the date and site and things like that. They also mentioned something about when to look at contracts to, it was probably at the year also for contracts with potential site of the forum.
Okay. So they said contracts about 1 year before.
Yeah, 1 year before, set the date of the forum. So we need to get the site and get the contract 1 year before.
Liz, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, so would you like some feedback, kind of having run partners for several years, as far as how I had to, like, what I knew from that as far as the planning for that each year?
All input is welcome.
Okay, so generally, set date and location for YLF definitely a year in advance, because to do the hotel, I was generally booking the hotel. And now, so this was me and this was the embassy. So just keep that in mind. But generally by June or July of the year before, we started in January. So it was only 6 months out, but it was very risky with that. So you really, and the only reason I did it that far is because I was just still in a class, so I couldn't prepare for the next year while I was finished. So because it ran from January to June. So the year out is definitely it, because you want to set up, not only the date, but then you want to start discussing what rooms are available, because you need to know how many breakout rooms you're going to have on that session. Is it only going to be one room? Will there be breakout sessions like they did for partners? Also at that point, you don't have to, you have to know if there's going to be any rooms. If this is going to be an overnight thing, they need to know how to book the rooms, because they want to book that at least a year in advance to do that. Speakers generally anywhere from 9 months to a year ahead of time, depending upon who you're looking at and depending upon if you're bringing in national speakers. With that, you need to consider the part with speakers is that you have to see how it's going to work, as far as it can get difficult with having to remain in the state rates. So you've got to be able to incorporate the airlines that they're coming in, or renting a car, or both, including the food that there will be. If you put it in a hotel where the food's, like with Embassy, where there was breakfast, then you're able to use that breakfast as a meal that didn't have to be paid for, kind of thing. And then they usually got their lunch or dinner with us at partners. So if, depending upon the forum, is an all day thing or several days, you got to keep that in mind. I'm trying to think. I think the lineup speakers probably could go at the 12-month mark at the same time as the set date and location for YLF. And that totally depends on who you're needing, because if you're using state people, you don't need them as far in advance as you do a national speaker. That's what's coming to mind right now, Lillian.
That makes a lot of sense. So it seems like, based on that, that also gives us a jumping point for some other, bullet points that we have. So it seems like we need to finalize topics, obviously, before 12-month mark. So then we can then do, speakers and booking and things like that. I think one of the first things we need to decide probably is going to be the length of forum, because then we can then determine what our slate of topics is based within that time constraint. So maybe by that 3-month mark, we can put length of forum. And then what do you guys think of finalization of topics after that? So then we can really get that stuff rolling.
Lillian, I think Jill has her hand raised.
Okay, Jill.
Nicole, I did have my handwriting actually, but I have a terrible itch. So sometimes it might appear that way, but
Okay.
I do have my handwriting. Miss Nicole, did you find this suggested timeline in the handbook?
When Lillian sent the handbook, I think we found it was the 2 years, like the 1 year out, it was, oh, where was it? Yeah, I found it. I did find it all in those two things in the handbook, those two little dates.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and they start, I think it was on page 10 where they talked about the forum.
Okay.
And I was thinking what we could add maybe at 6 months is we need to like start soliciting, like when we get to the topics and when it might be, well, of course we need to get like advertising or to solicit volunteers and start getting the word out about YLF.
So outreach.
Or at least, you know, some kind of plan by then.
Amy, should we do this document the other way around instead? Because instead of 3 months, it's months. Working our way up, but shouldn't we work our way down? That's like,
You're muted. Do you mean have 24 months up at the top and then 12 months and then 6 and 3?
I did, and I think y'all muted me because I couldn't unmute myself unless I hold the space bar. But that was just a suggestion since this is like 24 months out. Shouldn't it go down since it's like a countdown? But maybe not.
I can change it however you want, but I think that 3 months refers to like 3 months from now instead of 3 months out from the event.
Okay, then definitely.
It might make, yeah, it probably makes a little bit more sense when you say it like
I
that.
thought it was the other way around. My bad.
Building off of what Nicole was saying with the outreach, marketing, advertising, maybe that 6 months we have. Let me try to think of how to word this. Maybe that's whenever we start developing those recruitment and diversity strategies that we talk about. And maybe the actual outreach happens more at the 12-month mark where we're more clear on where the location and contracts and the speakers will be. What do you think about that, Nicole?
Did find another something related to that in the National Handbook on page 15. At 6 months, it says they're starting to create and package the applications for the delegates. So it all kind of happens around the same time. At that 6 months, you know, 6 months from now, that's where we would be if we would be having the event in 2 years at 24 months.
Is
So
that?
yeah, that's.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just reading, trying to figure out what else it says in here. That
Do you know if that's starting to develop the applications itself or sending out the applications? Does it say?
It just says creating and packaging the applications takes 3 months. So that means you start at 6 months because we want to have these applications sent out at 12 months.
Oh, that makes sense.
I was trying to read it and understand it too. So I'm like, the bullets like this are much more helpful at kind of figuring out when we need to do stuff.
Dylan, I saw your hand raised earlier. Oh, there it is again. What were you going to say?
So yeah, I kind of have a question of what does it mean by the age or range of delegates for the 3-month part?
Okay, so I think Bambi also put a question in the chat about that too, of what the age range, and so that would be like what ages we would take for the YLAF. So we say, okay, maybe it's just high school
Okay.
years, or maybe it's like 13 to 18. It's just deciding what ages we would take. And so Bambi asked if that's specified by national or we decide, and we really get to decide that ourselves, which is pretty cool.
I see. And like through, how do I put it? Like all the months. So that's like all the steps that we're trying to see about how I put it, making this committee, I would say.
Yeah. So it's like, I guess we're planning our next steps in our next meetings of what are
Oh,
3
okay.
months from now, 12 months from now, what will our meetings look like and what will we be discussing?
I see.
Bambi has in the chat, she did see the sample in the handbook, had a target age of high school with juniors and seniors in high school.
Liz has her hand raised, Lillian.
Okay.
You good for me, Lillian?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay. That's okay. Thanks, Ebony. What I wanted to say about the age is just to keep in mind, if you're doing a day one or an overnight based on the ages with legal ages. If you're doing a 16 to 19 or 15 to 19, you're looking at some of them underage sleeping there. What's that accommodation look like, and what are the requirements for that? I don't know what other states do. I think that's important to look into it and see if it. Also, you need to consider when you consider that if any of these youth will need to have one of their DSPs with them staying in. So that may be an added expense if it's an overnight. Whether it's an overnight or day, you still got to look at the DSP cost for. If it's a room, it's no more cost if they get one room. But if it's an staying for eating and things like that, you just need to consider all those things too.
Thank you. I think so. From what I understand of YLFs across the country, there's generally like 1 or 2 ways that they'll do overnight. So most of them are overnight, and they'll either utilize a hotel or college campuses to mimic that sort of independent living experience. And generally, if they need DSPs, I want to say sometimes they'll provide them, because they'll generally try to avoid, specifically if an individual needs support like DSP support, they'll try to avoid having the parents there just so they can simulate, like I said, that independent living as much as possible. And so I think in the handbook they have, I have to pull it up, they have guidance on that, but it really just, it depends. I'm trying to look at it. But I want to say that there are some YLFs that some of the volunteer staff that they recruit are like nursing students as well. So they kind of have a diverse staff that can really, cater to the needs of the different delegates. Amy says, I suggest consulting with the universities that have programs. They do an excellent job of having natural peer mentors. Yeah. So like I think the UFL Life program, Bridge to Independence.
Yeah,
Jill,
no, I think it's fabulous. I mean, because the whole point is to give them their independence. So to continue to, have them bring that DSP. I was just making sure if there's anybody who had needs that were higher, that you had somebody who was able to work with them so that they had the opportunity also. So no, I think that's great. I mean, I think back to when my daughter was 13 years old and went on a overnight cheer camp. They each had their own dormitory rooms, two of them shared, but then they had one staff member keeping track, making sure that, that kind of stuff. So I think you can do the same thing. I don't think there should be any difference. I just wanted to throw that out there and keep that in mind.
thank you, Liz. I'm really relieved that you're here because you bring such a great perspective to the table. Jill, I see you have your hand raised.
Back to what Bambi was saying, when I went, it was made for the age range was for high schoolers who were going into their June, because mine was over the summer, so it was going into your junior year, and then individuals going into senior year, and that was the age range, like, not to like discourage anyone, but it was for incoming juniors and seniors was the not yeah, it was just incoming juniors and seniors when I went back in the day.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, you have older individuals who may be easier to, I hate to use the word monitor, that sounds creepy. But we have older individuals who are more mature. And then also it may make sense for that starting out as well, because you have a smaller pool of potential participants, because we'll probably start out small anyway. But
and then it was a college campus, so I think the logical thing to do was get that college prep age, which is juniors and seniors, because my biggest blessing in life was having a sister 1 school year above me.
oh,
1 grade above me. So I knew that, okay, you can't start all this as a senior. You've got to start all this as a junior. So I think the age range should be incoming juniors and seniors, and maybe even some like recent high school graduates. That's my opinion. I'm repetitive. Sorry.
no, you're actually not. I think you brought up a really good point about how, juniors and seniors, that's the time that you start looking at, okay, college prep, job prep, independent living prep. That's kind of that time period. And I think that
was when, like, I thought that the idea was of living in a college dorm was really beneficial to incoming juniors and incoming seniors. So, like, logically, it just felt perfect.
Yeah, because whenever I've talked to any sort of YLF delegate from any state, from any time period, it's like the ones that went to the college campuses really talk about how, like you said, how beneficial it was to experience YLF specifically on that campus. Not only to experience what it's like to potentially, what it would look like for them to live independently, but also what does it look like to navigate a college campus, right? What does a college campus look like? What does it look like day to day? But I think with our age range and location being, I think 3 and 6, I think 12 months, I think we are doing great because we are like so ahead of schedule with these discussions. Like, I think we can give ourselves a high five. So,
Well, Lillian, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What I was going to say, and what with our college campus, and I'm so glad Jill was talking about that, is that now that the state of Louisiana has at least 3, maybe 4, I don't know, ULL, Southeastern, BRCC. I mean, there's community colleges and regular universities that are now having the post-secondary education for those with disabilities. This gives it an even bigger opportunity, not to mention that LSU HDC is doing the Paychecks program, which is actually seniors in high school who are actually going a dual thing. Instead of going onto the high school campus anymore, Paycheck actually puts them half a year on a college campus and half a year on in the workforce. So these are kids who are seniors who are already experiencing this when they're seniors. And what they're doing is they're able to use IDEA money to do this. So I just am throwing that out for the purpose of it's already being done in Paycheck for HDC in their senior year, but also they're able to use IDEA money because the schools are still getting the money, but then the schools are giving the money for those students to be able to go to Delgado and take classes and then to actually get a paying job after they do that. So I just am throwing that out there. I don't know if that might even be the thought of getting somebody from Paycheck to talk and explain kind of what they're doing and how that works and things like that for funding, because that could be a potential too. Not from them, but through LRS, through IDEA, these are where the money sources are coming from for Paycheck.
And I think, thank you. And I know that we have, Bambi says in the chat, I agree with Liz, there are lots of opportunities for partnerships for funding. Yes. And I think Melissa Baham is actually a member of this committee. And I think she said that LRS maybe through pre-ET funding may be able to assist with the expenses of YLF, though obviously I can't speak for her, but I know she's mentioned that in previous meetings. So one other thing too is that when speaking with other states who run YLF, they talk about how they'll generally try to keep the location kind of close to the Capitol, because generally they'll have a day where they go to the Capitol and do mock debates and meet with legislators and stuff like that. So, right, like I see Ms. Liz excited. I know it makes me excited too. So Nicole, I see your hands raised.
So talking about that, maybe 6 months, we can add a bullet for funding.
Yes. Or, I mean, would that even be like something that we need to start doing at 3 months?
3.
I mean, it's such
So
a big.
I don't think it's never too early to start looking at your options. So I would put it at 3 months. And also, I don't know who's typing, but if they don't mind adding just like funding, put next to it, just so we can remember, dash LRS, dash IDEA funds, maybe in parentheses for IDEA funds, put Paycheck program, just so we can go back to know what we were talking about. So we don't forget what we've kind of thrown out, and thank you, state, you know what I'm saying? So as we're kind of brainstorming, I think if we're doing that, and then just somewhere, I guess, looking at college campuses, like you said, what maybe that needs to be a 3 or 6 month based on where we're going to do it. Like you said, with the Capitol, I know BRCC has started it. So maybe it's being on BRCC, maybe it's LSU. I mean, even though they're not, I will tell you, which was very, very interesting, within the last 2 years, and I can't remember which, I remember answering a survey for LSU asking that as a parent, would I be interested in seeing a same post-secondary thing that they had like ULL and like Southeastern. I was blown away when I saw it. I don't even remember where I saw it, but it came through and I applied. You know, I answered because I think it is an opportunity with so many kids out there who are loving ULL. I mean, imagine the potential of LSU in our state capital to be able to have a program like this for, you know, individuals with disabilities, students. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be phenomenal. So maybe like you said, 6 months we start looking at colleges, and maybe that 12 month we make that final decision. Before Jill, I see your hand raised, but I do want to ask one question real quick to Amy. I don't know if you'll know the answer off the top of your head because it's, you know, nitty gritty stuff. But so as far as DD Council funding goes, I understand that this would probably be something that would be put in 5-year plan versus yearly plan, correct? If DD Council be a funder.
Most likely we can work it in as an activity in a 1-year plan. I think our 5-year plan is probably broad enough that we can figure out a good place somewhere within our advocacy part to kind of put YLF in there for funding at a later date.
Okay. So the reason why I'm asking is I'm just trying to figure out like how that fits into timeline. So like at what point do we come to the council and say, hey, okay, in 2 years, we want to implement this program? At what point do we go to the council and start advocating for that?
So I'm not 100% on my timelines either, because this will be my first go round. But next time that we're discussing the annual plan, so the next time that we're doing a planning committee, that would probably be the time to do it. And that should be, I'm thinking sometime near the beginning of the year, it will start up.
Okay. So that would be 3 months then, right? So I guess that would be under 3 months. So can we add a bullet point and add that under the 3 months, like discussion with DDC, I guess? Jill, what were you going to say?
Miss Amy, to prevent my confusion, on every header you have, can you write like 3 months and then in parentheses, can you write from now? And then also the planning committee meets in June, July. So I think you would ask them, I think you would remind the full council that this to add this to the 23 plan would be like sometime in January or April of next year, because this would be the funding you're asking for would be added to the 23 plan, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that starts in June or July. So January, April, you might, or even next week, you might wanna get the wheels for the council, get the wheels turning and so we we can ask sometime in January, April to add the funding to the 23 plan, because the planning committee will be meeting, like I said, in June, July.
Okay.
Thank you, Jill. And I want to point out that Bambi put in the chat, I know Baton Rouge Capital is important, but it may be more feasible to have it at a university with a program that has students living on campus, because that university understands what we're doing and the values that we're doing. Yes, I completely agree. And I mean, it always can just be, okay, we take a longer bus trip to the Capitol, right? Because we want to be at a university that really just gets the values of YLF. Liz, I see that you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I kind of forgot what I was going to say before, but in reference to what Bambi was saying, okay, let me back up. I want to talk about that one too, in case I forget. This goes back to the funding and DD Council. The question is that the goal is 2 years out to hold the first forum. After that, what is the goal? Is the goal to have a forum every year with new delegates, or is it to do follow-ups maybe the next year? Because what I was thinking was, if you give them a forum and you start getting them prepared for what, I'm sorry, my mind is exploding all of a sudden with ideas. Okay. If you give them a forum 1 year that's focused on history and this and that, and then the next year you could come back and focus on it with the same group, maybe being legislatively wise and having it at the Capitol and kind of working the things in. Or maybe there's a field trip later on in that year where they did the YLF actual forum, and then they come back and do a campus thing on, I'm not a campus thing, but go to the Capitol. I'm just kind of thinking out loud the different ways that could potentially continue, if it's going to be an ongoing thing with new recruits every year, or is it going to be something that's ongoing all year long for forums? Like, I'm kind of picturing it like a leadership program that not only does a forum, but they continue on throughout the year doing other little things for a year, and then you get through 30 new ones or 15 new ones the next year. I'm imagining it kind of like a partners in policy making, where you're giving them more information than just one forum several times in that year. That way you're continuing to grow them and build them instead of just a one-time stop. I'm just thinking out like big. I'm sorry.
No, I love your ideas. Thank you for bringing them to the table. So just as some background, so generally nationally what YLF will look like is that they'll have like 3-4 days or like up to a week of like, it's like a week-long summer camp almost, where it's like self-advocacy skills, legislative skills, life skills, et cetera, et cetera. But the intention actually, like you said, is it's a stepping stone towards partners. So whenever I would talk to other states, they were like so confused when I brought up the fact that we had a really successful partners program, but haven't had a YLF for over 15 years, because to other states, it was like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. That's not how the natural progression of things goes. So I think for our first year, obviously we need the input of the committee. It may be simpler just to have it within that 1 week, so we can kind of start and get our feet underneath us, right? Before, expanding to something as big as partners. But
no, forgive me, because the 1 week I was not clear on that. And since I wasn't in the first one, I wasn't aware that it was a 1 week, because you can do a lot in a 1 week, and that could be a field trip to the Capitol and stuff. And you're keeping them engaged, you're keeping them excited. It's one of those things I've said over and over with partners. Partners is successful because you bring the groups together and they spend the night together and they learn from each other and they gain. If you do virtual, you just don't get the same impact of these people being in the same room, the same evening, and that kind of thing. So a week long is extremely powerful. So
yeah,
I got it.
I think it's like partners, like condensed into one really super intense week. I mean, that's my understanding of it. So it sounds, I mean, I participated virtually the past 2 years and it's intense, but it's great. It's effective because it's so intense. So it sounds like we have a lot of ideas as far as location and formatting and planning. I'm just trying to think about what's next. Oh, Amy, you put the dates. Thank you. That's fantastic. So as far,
If I could make a suggestion, at some point you also need to determine how many people you want to accept the first year, and then there might need to be some sort of group that reviews applications and decides who gets in if you have more than you can actually accept.
thank you. Thank you for bringing that to the forefront of our minds because I completely forgot about it. Maybe we have that. What do you guys think? Maybe 3 months to figure out? Dylan.
I think that would make sense. I think 3 months would make sense in that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, because while we're discussing like the nitty gritty, like length of form and age range, I mean, I would think so. Liz Carey, love it in the chat, all caps. So it almost brings us naturally to our next agenda item is kind of figuring out what the distribution of work will be. So Amy mentioned like a group of people who would decide on who gets in and who doesn't if we have an overflow of applicants, right? And one thing that Louisiana did have and some other states do have as well is that they have, it wasn't a nomination committee. I think it was called a selection committee. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is that the work is distributed sometimes among committees. So I know that we have our YLF committee here today, but in some other states and what we did here in the early 2000s was that we had this main YLF committee with these like subcommittees. And so like one of those subcommittees would be in charge of selecting those applicants to say, okay, these are the delegates that we want for this year out of this pool of applicants. And another subcommittee would say, okay, how are we going to get funding done? They reach out to previous funding partners, figuring out new funding partners, etc. So the agenda item that we have is figuring out, okay, how do we want to structure our work? How do we want to form these committees if we want to form committees? Also, what can the DD Council staff do as well? So I just want to open up that discussion for what this is going to look like for the next 2 years as we plan this. And would love if our DD Council staff could also participate just because they're going to be a huge piece to this as well. So I do want to mention that I acknowledge that our YLF committee is fairly small. And so making subcommittees may be challenging considering that we have a pretty tight-knit committee already. So Amy, do you have any input on this as our ED? I think she may have took a break.
Sorry about that. I had to step away.
No worries.
Can you ask me again?
Yeah, so I was just saying, do you have any thoughts on what this distribution of work may look like moving forward as our DD Council ED?
I mean, like you said before, your committee is not very large. So making subcommittees, I think, will be difficult to do. So you either have subcommittees that are made up of only 2 or 3 people, or you continue on as a kind of small group and just make all decisions together. Or you could, I guess, go out and recruit for new members, new people who are interested in being a part of the committee, to kind of add some numbers. Then maybe that makes it a little bit easier to break off into subcommittees. Yeah, because you have, I believe, 9 committee members and a lot of work to accomplish.
Yeah, thank you for the gentle reminder of the path that we have ahead, right? Bambi asked, am I a member of this committee? Well, considering that you're a panelist, I would say so. So Dylan, I think you had your hand raised first.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with on that. Like first, I was kind of thinking like, with that subcommittee, at first we could just like kind of start our way up small and then work our way up from there, if that makes sense. You know, like first get like some more youth members or get some more people involved, and then once that happens, then we can accomplish more than, you know, just having a small group. Because it is good to have a small group, but also it's also good to have a lot more people, I would say, or more people into your small groups, so that way you can get more done. But to me, I guess it just really depends on how that person is committed to want to get these accomplishments done, because that it pays to have a person want to get this stuff done right and want to like work with other people in that group as well. And that's what I think of that.
I think that you're such a voice of reason in all this, so thank you. You know, I think, like Amy said, you know, we have a lot of work ahead of us. And then like you said, okay, small groups are great, but expansion may be the way to go. So maybe part of our like plan that we just wrote out is expansion of this committee. Okay, so maybe we start out small. Maybe we say, okay, for 3 months, it's just us, you know, I just moved the whole table. It's just us, our small gang that we have right now. But maybe by 6 months, we start trying to recruit more people. In 12 months, we have a bigger committee that we can then parcel out into smaller subcommittees that does, you know, all these little things that we have laid out. So Nicole, I think you were next, if I'm remembering correctly.
I was just going to say the same thing, recruiting more youth, more self-advocates, because when we actually get to the forum, it is going to be about the people that are participating, the people that are presenting. Us as an ad hoc committee are here to help ramp it up, but to start building out and getting more people that will actually be involved in it too. You know, looking at it maybe at 3 months, and like you have soliciting the volunteers and everything at 6 months.
Okay, yeah, so 6 months we start looking at expansion. I think you bring up the point that we should just always keep in the forefront of our minds that it's for the youth. And so we need to recruit more young people, more self-advocates, the people that we will be creating the forum for. Was it Jill or Liz who had their hand up next?
I think it was Liz.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I agree fully with Derek and was it Derek? I'm sorry. Did I say Dylan? I'm sorry, Dylan. I apologize. I agree with Dylan and Nicole, but what I do think we should probably talk about doing now is figuring out what committees you want first. And that way you can focus on getting more people who would be interested in specific committees. And with that being said, I definitely absolutely 100% agree that you need more youth on here because they need to have a word in what they want in this forum more than we do. So, but I definitely think you can look into committees because you're going to have so many different, because you're going to need a financial committee who's looking at trying to get the funding. You're going to have the actual, I don't want to say party committee, but the people planning the 7 days. And that in itself is huge, different than just speakers. You know what I'm saying? Like the the locations, the things that are occur on what days and how we're going to get there and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you have quite a number of committees, but I would definitely plan the committees, even talk about them today, so that then you can focus on letting other people know we're planning this. It's going to be huge and that kind of thing. But I think that's important.
So I would like to make an official motion to have an official party committee, just for fun. But maybe I misheard you. Maybe you didn't say party committee, but I think that'd be a really fun committee to have. But yeah, so maybe we start. What were you saying?
No, I was going to say absolutely, because when you say party committee, because it's, you got to keep in mind too, that you're not only going to want this is where they're going to be learning and I say like academics and learning about different things, but you got to have events in the evenings where it's kind of just chilled, where they can, you know, after dinner, they have a couple of hours or two of do something, whether you plan a karaoke party or whether you plan, but you've got to have something that engages them, because if they think they're coming to learn all day long, they're going to be like, I don't want it. But if there's excitement and connections and you're getting to know other people from Baton Rouge, you're now learning to know people up in Monroe, and they're going to connect. And then they decide, oh, we could be roommates at the college down in Lafayette, that kind of thing. So I think I'm sorry, I'm getting like so excited. I want to go.
I relate. I mean, this is exciting stuff. And I think it's really important for us to be excited whenever we're in these meetings, because it's like, while planning the YLF, we need to have that same excitement that the YLF is going to have. And so maybe we do have a committee called the party committee, but it is making sure that YLF is true to YLF. That, like you said, it's not just learning, but okay, we get to do all this really cool stuff together and we make it fun, because it needs to be fun. It doesn't need to be boring. It doesn't, I mean, in order to engage youth, we need that party aspect, or maybe entertainment committee. We can call it whatever. We could call it the confetti committee. I think that would also be fun. But I think that's a great point that we need to keep in mind, that, okay, A, we need youth on these committees, and B, it needs to be fun. It needs to be engaging. So Jill, you had your hand up next.
I was listening to what y'all were saying, but I was in the other room when y'all were talking about selection of delegates. I haven't read the handbook yet. It's on I have a to-do list, and then I have a DDC to-do list, and my council to-do list goes on forever. But so I know with partners and I know with council membership, there's partners has a criteria of what, like a selection criteria, and we all know that the DD Act has membership requirements. In the YLF handbook, is there anything about a selection criteria or process? Because that would be something to start looking at. I'm like, when we're planning delegate or like selection, the first step into planning selection is obviously gonna be, what is our do we have a selection criteria? And if we do, we need to obviously follow that. And what is it? And we need to follow it. But B, if I had this whole spiel, y'all, like, if we have if YLF has a selection criteria, we definitely need to look into what it is, and then if not, like, do we make one? Or like, we need to look before we look into selection, we need to look into selection criteria.
I think you bring up.
I mean, 12 minutes to say 5 words, so my bad again.
Thank you, Jill. No worries. I always appreciate hearing your input. So there actually is some selection criteria laid out in the handbook. And so I'm going to send that link in the chat. It's on page 14 and on, where they kind of describe what the selection process may or may not look like. Some, vague criteria that they have. We may want to develop more specific criteria. We may not. I mean, it's just up to our committee. So thank you for bringing that up, Jill. I just sent it in the chat. I think it'd be a good time for us to take a 5-minute break. And so, so maybe we can re-adjourn at 10:10-ish. I don't see any other hand raised. So in the meantime, if you want to take a look at the manual, great. If not, I'll see you very soon. So thank you guys. Hello, everyone. It is about 10-ish 11. So if everyone could come back, that would be great.
Wouldn't that be 10, 11-ish?
Yeah, I realized that after I said it, but then it was too late. So
I'm famous for that one.
yeah, I'm sure like everyone can relate. You say something and you're like, oh no, that didn't come out right.
Before we really get started again, can everybody kind of look at the timeline and see if there's anything that needs to be moved around? It was mentioned that maybe recruiting more committee members should be moved up. So I just wanted to see if there's anything that needs to be moved from one area to another.
I kind of think we need to start recruiting more committee members at 3 months, but that's just me. I would love to hear what you guys think as well. Just so then by 6 months we have those committee members is what I'm thinking.
That I think Nicole had mentioned moving it up earlier.
Yeah, I think just at least start looking and, you know, at 3 months.
Chandra, I see that you have your hand raised.
I'm sorry, I clicked it accidentally.
Oh, no worries. So my question to you guys is, I know Liz had mentioned figuring out which committees we're going to have. Do you guys want to do that at 3 months, or do you guys want to do that with the time that we have remaining today?
Lillian, I personally don't feel like it would hurt to at least start it today and just kind of be thinking about it, because then that gives you, as we think about it and over the next meeting, then you can think about something else, you know, other ones that may come up as we're thinking about it. And then of course, when you have the council meeting and you're introducing this, there may be more recommendations. But I think if you start kind of devising what committees are important right now, I think that's really probably good to start now. It can't hurt. Unless you have something else on the agenda that you needed to accomplish today, I think that planning the committees would probably be good, because then as you meet at the council meeting on October, you can start to get more people talking about it, and the committees and the planning stuff.
I think that's a great point. And I think the cool thing is our agenda today is pretty broad as far as our agenda item that we're on now. And essentially the last agenda item is the distribution of work and figuring out what that's going to look like. And that's a huge piece of that. So thank you for bringing that up. Nicole, did you have your hand raised or?
No, I was agreeing with what Liz was saying, you know, just to start. I had a couple of committees in mind too, to at least start with.
You want to share what those ideas are?
Well, I think one thing, like Liz was saying, it's never too early to start about fundraising or like a funding committee. I just had some broad ideas. Another one was, and it probably needs to be broken down, would be logistics, like where, when, to find the place, and things like that. There's probably a better way to talk about it or phrase it.
I just want to say that if you guys start hearing screaming, my 2 cats are about to have like a fist fight in the middle of the living room. So I just want to apologize in advance. So the logistics part, I think it'll be really important to have a lot of staff input on that, just because I know that likely if the DD Council does decide to approve funding for the wildlife, the staff will be a huge part of that logistic planning, right? So I just wanted to mention that. Another thing that I did want to mention as well is that under the funding committee, I know I'm putting the cart before the horse, but under the funding committee, one of the reasons why our previous wildlife essentially kind of died was because there was no sustainability plan, and then Katrina hit, right? And they were never really able to get it back on its feet as far as funding goes. And so whenever we're looking at funding, I think one thing that we really want to heavily consider is potential grants that are not dependent on state funding. So if something like Katrina happens, or, similar circumstances to, in 2005 when YLF previously ended, there's that backup plan, and there's a sustainability plan where it doesn't just, fizzle into non-existence. So I wanted to mention that before moving on. So Jill, I see you have your hand raised.
I think you mentioned something like it's just how we wanted to do. I forgot what I was gonna say, Lil, but what time we have till 11? What time does this end?
We adjourn at 11, and so currently it's 10:17.
So I don't think so. I mean, if we wanted to start looking at the 3-month list, we're not overly pressed for time, but we kind of, not really. So I didn't know what else. I don't know, y'all, never mind.
No worries. So were you thinking of starting on the 3-month bullet points? Is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah, whatever you were asking us, if we wanted to do the 3-month work, or, I don't know, y'all, never mind.
I think I get what you're saying. So I think earlier we were trying to figure out. I think earlier we were trying to figure out what we were going to do with, our remaining time. And I think right now we're kind of looking at distribution of work and what that's going to look like, and potential committees.
Okay.
So thanks, Jill. And so then I think Bambi, I see your hand is raised too.
I was going to ask about the funding. So would YLF fall under the category essentially like the same as partners, where I know there's some restrictions around the DD Council funding, where it's really, they're supposed to fund pilots, and it's supposed to, those pilots are then supposed to have sustainability after that. But is this an issue where YLF could be part of the annual plans, funding plans, like LACAN and partners are?
So I think it's a difficult question. So I think it would be similar to partners, because YLF is intended to be a stepping stone to partners. It's supposed to be the youth version of partners. Previously, whenever we had our YLF in 2000 to 2005, we had a variety of state agencies whose hands were in the pot. So the steering committee back then, or essentially what we are now, fell under the LADDC. But on this steering committee, they had different state agencies who were also helping fund it in addition to the council. So I think it was Human Development Center, LRS, OCDD, Department of Ed. I think there were some families helping families who had the hands in the pot as well. So it was a good variety of state agencies who were all contributing funding to this program or some sort of assistance. So that's how it was structured then. Different states, YLF funds it differently. So some states have like a specific nonprofit for YLF, which is obviously probably not what we're going to do. But there's some states that it does fall under the DD Council, which is, I think, the direction that we're going in, since this committee does fall under the DD Council. So I would hope that the DD Council is, hopefully they would be supportive in having this and, the 5-year plan. I don't see why not, since it's similar to partners. But Liz, what were you going to say?
I just might add that be sure, based on not knowing what the amount that this could cost, is to just be open to other agencies who have youth that would be interested in being a part of it too. So I think it's critical, kind of, as you said, not to put all your eggs in one basket, to make sure that you have it across the board so that that we're working in partnership with other agencies to ensure not only the funding, but also because there's a buy-in. If they're funding it, they're going to be also helping support it. They're going to also be helping push it and get more people involved in it. So I think it definitely pays for you to have other funders involved and have the buy-in with that, not only from the financial matter, but also getting the people involved and the ones who would be a part of it also.
Absolutely. I just sent from the National Association for YLFs, a budget sample. It's in the chat. The budget sample is the total cost is pretty large, but we also have to acknowledge that this is for probably more delegates than we're interested in. They said projected cost for 60 delegates. So maybe we say we don't want to have 60 delegates the first year because that's quite a lot of people, but rather we want 15 for our first year. And maybe instead of, a week-long YLF, maybe instead of like a week-long YLF, like I think this is projecting, we look at a 4-day YLF. So while this total cost is $95,000, we're not going to have a YLF of this magnitude our first year. So I just wanted to send that in the chat for, some supplemental information, because I think it's interesting.
Lillian, that was great. Thank you. And with that being said, 95,000 is not unreasonable for a week long for 60 people, because that's about the budget of partners for 6 months, which included a salary. So that is not unreasonable at all for that. One thing to consider, and I think what you were saying is start out smaller in the first year to get your feet wet, because to try to get, have 60 people when it's the very first time could be extremely trying and cumbersome and things like that. I'm not saying it's not doable in the future, but 30, I think, is going to be a good start. One of the things and what you got to consider is what you're going to have once you get these groups together, you're going to have little pockets of people going off in different areas and forming little, whatever clicks. I don't want to say that. I hate to say that, but that did happen even with partners, you know what I'm saying? But I think with 30, it's a potential that they're all going to be kind of like starstruck and like what's going on, and they're going to want to come together as a group. And then as you learn, you expand and get it bigger and bring more people in as your experience with it gets more, I don't know the word I'm using, but anyway, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, just the thought of having 60 participants kind of makes me a bit nauseous. I mean, just the thought of that many people our first year, I mean, that would just be kind of insane. Because I just think of I just can't even imagine how hard it is to plan like quarterly DD council meetings in person for 25 people, right? For 2 days. So starting out small, I think, is going to be our best bet. But I don't know. Does anyone else have any input on anything, everything?
Okay, well, first of all, I didn't realize this was from California, and the first thing I saw was the word Sacramento. I'm like, yeah, what's a Sacramento dorm? But then I saw this was from California. Was like, okay, got it. But so you say 60 delegates may be too much. So, and this is a rather large budget. So my suggestion is if we do 30, if we do 30 delegates, we and just making the 30 delegates in the budget cost would be whatever 95, 955. I can't read, but it would cut the $93,550 in half. But is 30 larger than what you were thinking too, Lil? Cause we
it's really,
cut it again and do, since it is the first run, we could do 15 and cut it. I can't do that. Cut it, take half of the half. Would that be a third, a fourth?
I think really we have a lot of freedom whenever it comes to what we want this to look like the first year. I mean,
Right.
obviously it'll depend on the additional. What? Sorry.
No, I was agreeing with you, like we can do what we can make it look however we want. And I did see, I have looked into the past. Like I can't, because of Katrina, I can't pin down any official documents of what this looked like for those 5 years. Because if you cut your delegates in half, you cut your budget in half, and then, but if that's still large for our first one, you can even cut the 30 in half and cut whatever that budget is and take half of that budget. No, it's half of a fourth. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Math was a while ago.
Math is the worst. I hate math. I'm not gonna lie to you. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of wiggle room, and it's just figuring out what we want this to look like the first year, and also who our partners will be as well. Because I think
Right.
Nicole, you call it Google Foo. She used her Google Foo skills and found DD Council minutes from, I want to say like 2009.
Yeah, 2009. Yeah.
I couldn't pull that up at all.
Yeah, so it was from 2009, and they were discussing restarting YLF, which ultimately was unsuccessful. But I think the DD Council was going to contribute about $17,000 to the initiative. Like that was planned, in addition to, those other state agencies that were involved. So we've got a big task in front of us. And we have our, logistics committee, our funding committee. I know we've talked about funding in depth. We have that supposed party committee that Liz and I were talking about. One thing I did want to mention is that I know we had talked about like notifying like the governor's committee in California. It was something mentioned in the handbook. I had talked to someone who runs YLF in another state, and she had said, because this handbook is pretty outdated, I think it's like from 2007, really we can just notify the National AYLF, the National Association on YLF, send them an email, say, hey, look, we're thinking of starting a YLF. And she said we should be good to go after that. So it doesn't seem like it's as much of a formal process as it was when the handbook was first created. So I did want to let you guys know about that before I forgot.
Can I ask another question?
Go for it.
You said you found a 2009 mention.
Yeah.
Can y'all make that a link in any way?
You know, I'm gonna have to pull it up, but I'm sure I can find it somewhere. Yeah, I'll try to find it and send it over to you, Jill.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, it was DEC minutes from 2008. And I'll put it in the chat.
Find it, like, oh, it was April 2008.
Looks like it, yeah. It was like a brief blurb. I mean, it wasn't anything extensive, but I mean, finding information about the YLF that was here has been nearly impossible. I mean, really, most of the information we have is from word of mouth. I'm not really sure. Like, I would love, I don't know. It's just been so difficult to find. I don't know if that's because people have gotten rid of the documents they use because it was like, okay, YLF isn't a thing anymore and hasn't been.
It was because the contact that I made was shoot. The kind said that all got destroyed in Katrina. Cause do we know the funding source? Well, we do know the funding source. Y'all, I picked up all my notebooks, so I don't even have my July notes I took, but we could contact our funding sources from 2005, which sounds ridiculous, and see if they have any type of documents.
So I have a couple notes in this document that I just found on my computer about where it seems like the funding came from based on stuff I've pieced together from people who were involved in it back in the day. I'll put it in the chat, but Liz, I see that you have your hand raised.
Did we not have any feedback from I'm sorry, it's drawn Matt Rivera? Because I know that when I was around, it was during his time when he was at the Governor's Office on Disability Affairs, because that's when it first started out. And of course, I had packets of information that I threw out probably 6 years ago because I said, oh, it is never going to happen again. And I could just kick myself. I mean, I could. I mean, I'm so aggravated with that now, thinking about this, having it's done a whole thing. But so I'm looking, funding came from Families Home from Jefferson, go to Oak City and Grant. So my other question is that some could some of this money have come? No, I was going to say after Katrina with the influx of money, but it was like 2005, and then it disbanded in 2006 when Jindal took over, because that's when Matt Rivera was out and Brandon Burris came in under Jindal administration for Governor's Office and Disability Affairs. I can talk to the Kelly at the ARC. I think she probably would remember stuff. She might. She's tends to keep a lot, so I'll check with her and see. And yes, Laura Bracken, you're right, Bambi, because her and Kelly were big back then with Laura and OCDD and all that stuff. But
Laura was the director for GOTA during the Foster administration. And so it started with Laura.
Oh, so it goes way back.
Laura, and then Matt Rivera, and then Brandon, and then me. And Laura met with me right when I got the job, I guess in 2016. I remember meeting with her in my office, and she told me a lot of details about this. So I know she knows.
Okay.
She has that.
She would be a good one. And she probably still has notes because she keeps stuff too, just like Kelly.
Bambi,
piece
do
together.
you have any archives?
No, whenever an administration leaves, they wipe out everything. Luckily, I have Jamar who kept some things. So
yeah, because actually, Jamar was one of the first people. It was before, a couple years ago. Jamar was one of the first people I touched base with about YLF, because his picture was next to an article about YLF in the GOTA newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Rose say, well,
what?
did you talk to Rose Gilbert?
Yeah, so I talked to Rose Gilbert, Mary Jacobs, Jamar Ennis, Brenda's daughter. There was 3 women who were like the top 3 dogs of the YLF, right? I talked to all 3 of them. They didn't have any documentation like everyone else. They had just thrown it out because they assumed it would never, happen again. And I also talked to Matt Rivera as well, but it really, none of them had any documentation. And it was so long ago that really remembering the minute details was difficult. So it's like, but really, I mean, we have this history of YLF here, but I think we also have to consider the fact that, YLF across the country looks different now than it did in the early 2000s, right? So we also need to, keep up. Yeah, and Sharon Del Visco. I think Sharon is supposed to be on this committee as well. Yeah, and so Susan said that this is a new opportunity to recreate it fresh and new. So we can, borrow from what we had, but keep up with the times. So Dylan, I see that you have your hand raised.
Like from my understanding from about the old committee, I still kind of find it weird that even though those people that were in the old committee thought it was never going to happen again, like recreating a new one, I just find it weird that you just throw out like all the old documents, because in my case, I would probably save them because you never know. But then again, that was like back then and things were different. And plus, it was like after the hurricane. So, with all that, I can understand that. But to me, it's almost like finding like, we try to like find old documents about something that they threw out like all those years ago. It's like, to me, it's like trying to find like some pieces of lost media, if that makes sense.
Dylan, when I tell you that finding information on our old YLF was like finding a needle in a haystack, I mean, it was ridiculous. But I really think it's because we've had such a lack of youth advocacy in our community for so many years now. Like after YLF stopped, I mean, we really haven't had a lot of youth advocacy. So it hasn't been on anyone's minds, So it was like, why keep it if we're not going to do anything surrounding it, right? What were you going to say, Jill?
Whoever mentioned the name Mike Foster made me feel about 1 zillion years old.
Oh, goodness. I'm sorry, Jill. So I actually don't think we have anything else on the agenda. I think we got a lot accomplished today. Does anyone have anything else to add? Any questions, more discussion? Just want to open the floor to anyone. Hey, Liz.
I just wanted to ask, do we want to add another committee or two before we disband, just as far as, just to kind of throw it out there? The funding committee, logistics committee, party committee, the party committee could be interested. What about like even like a speaker committee, speaker/topic committee? So you can start thinking about topics and then who the speakers are for that.
Okay.
Would that fall under logistics?
Well, kind of, sort of, but logistics is going to be more about the whole week-long event, where it's going to be, what is going to be every day, not so much what is going to be inside of every day, but Monday you'll be in LSU, whatever, doing this. Tuesday you'll be going to the Capitol, Wednesday. So that's where I think logistics more of planning. And that's going to have to be around, and then you'll have to figure out when you're putting your speakers in and how many. So they're going to all have to work together. But I think it's definitely speaker topic committee is different than logistics. That's just me personally. And I think, Nicole, you were shaking your head. So I think you were kind of thinking the same thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes, Nicole.
I had the same thought, and I had two other potential committees. One would be for staff volunteers, and then another would be, I'm guessing maybe selection and then participants, selection of the participants, and then someone, a committee like around the participants in YLF. It's a lot of committees, but I think it would cover most of the main topics.
But I think you need all those committees to really be an effective thing. And you got 2 years to do it. So I think it's good. I mean, you can always get rid of a committee and add it to another one if it doesn't work or you can't figure it out. But I think this is probably the best way to move forward now to make it the most effective.
Absolutely. And I think too, we have the opportunity to start these committees at different times. So we say, okay, our selection committee meets at the 12-month mark or even like the 14-month mark. So it's not necessarily like we have 500 committees starting right now, right? We can parcel it out amongst the timeline. So Dylan, I think your hand was raised next.
Yeah, and also going back to like moving on from the old committee to like this new one right now, I think is also to keep in mind that adding youth members here also needs to stay fresh in our minds as well, because if you like add more new members, then that'll be like way different than what we had all those years ago with that old committee, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely. I'm not even sure that they had youth members on the old committee. So we gotta make, Dylan, you and I, we gotta make sure the adults don't take over. We just gotta make sure that.
Yeah.
So Joe, you're not old. Joe, I think your hand was raised next.
I don't know if it's not how everything can be done, and I know I'm trying to prevent like bad feedback, but can an ad hoc committee have subcommittees, or like are we gonna have to like have a motion to have these ideas for these subcommittee topics, and then when the meeting comes around, like we have at the council meeting, like we'll have to officially form like this specific subcommittee and have Rashad appoint members to the subcommittees be made by the council as needed, and then like appoint members, like have the members appointed by Rashad as the individual committees, ad hoc committees are named, like, cause I don't know, like, if you, I don't know anything about like having subcommittees within an ad hoc committee. So I'm just thinking am I talking too much? Is that why you're laughing? Like,
No, I'm
keep us like, no offense to anyone, keep like our comments like when keeping our comments to a minimum or questions to a minimum. So I don't know how that works.
I just want to clarify that I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing at the idea that we're going to have subcommittees under ad hoc committee, because I think that idea is
never, and you know how much I read enough, but never read anything for nor against it. So
yeah,
where's Amy? What is your opinion? Hello, Amy here? Can I get a what up?
I'm here. I will get some clarification on it. I believe the way that it would work is Rashad appoints members to this ad hoc committee. And if there were subcommittees, Lillian, as the chair of this committee, appoints.
Okay.
But I will double check myself.
So we don't need full council to form all these different.
I don't think so, because these are, you're calling it subcommittees, but they're work groups. They're groups of people doing the work. So I don't.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like,
all right. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be super formal where we say, okay, it's like an official subcommittee, but rather just like subgroups where we say, okay, I want to be on the party committee, or I want to be on this committee. Like, I think it can be really natural, and call them mules. Sammy, can you verify that? Funding mules?
It's a joke.
Like,
mules do the work. So the name.
Oh, I was a little bit slow on the take on that one.
What? Can we go back? What?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the meeting. I was just making a joke. that obviously like wasn't, everyone didn't get, so I apologize.
So what I'm getting from this is they need to be on the party committee.
Robert's rules and look up a mule, but would it not be in there?
So with these jokes, I think you should be on the party committee, Bambi. So I'm officially making that appointment in this moment right now. I think we have a good slate of committees. I mean, does anyone have any further input or questions or
How
comments?
many committees is this?
We have like 500.
I was seriously like
Let's see,
ready to write my notes.
3, 4, 5, 6. It looks like about 6-ish.
Okay.
So Lillian, there was also another suggestion for a marketing committee by Liz, and Dylan has his hand raised.
Okay, yeah, Dylan.
Yeah, my question was that how do I put this? With us trying to get more youth members involved down the line, I'm wondering how we're gonna do that. Like, are we gonna find ways to promote that, or what's y'all's take on that?
Can we make it an can we put out an LA the y'all, I'm talking too much.
Mm-mm.
That's fine.
We
Can
could
we,
do that. I don't know how many youth it's going to hit. We can try it, but I don't really know how many youth it hits.
So if I could just quickly give my 2 cents, I think this will be our biggest challenge is recruiting the youth, because the way that our advocacy community stands right now, we don't have a lot of youth involved. And I think that's why this committee and the YLF is going to be so important, because then we can get those youth. But then the question is, how do we get them the first go round, right? So I think we're just going to have to get really creative. And I see, Liz, you have your hand raised.
So I think that has to do with the marketing outreach committee. And I'm going to put a recommendation ways. LaCia, Louisiana Special Education Association, they meet regularly, quarterly, I believe. And so they could be the stepping stone first of getting it into the school systems, because the LaCia is representatives of the districts. Of course, I also think, you reach out to the sister agencies, the Disability Rights Louisiana, you reach out to LSU HDC. I mean, there's a litany of them, but I'm just thinking you're going to get the most bang for your buck probably from the school system, because that's who you're trying to get as juniors and seniors. So you're going to have to figure out. So that would also include LDOE, SDE, whatever they call themselves right now. But that kind of thing, I think, would be the way to start getting the word out. I don't know, maybe if it's like even just some kind of, not a save the date, but some kind of 1-page flyer that says we're looking to bring back the Louisiana Youth Leadership Forum. We have it slated for the year of 2023 or something to that effect. But I think if you get something like that, a 1-pager out there, start trying to get that out. And Susan Reed saying counselors in the high schools, I'd agree with that too.
I like that.
I wish we could give each other high fives over Zoom. I see, Bambi, you have your hand raised.
So our Families Helping Family Centers, they know the people, young people, as well as our organizations that are doing pre-ets in schools. That would be another. So it would be, yeah, pre-ets vendors. Yeah.
Liz Gary says LRS, which is absolutely. Susan, we can outreach to local providers, parent groups, etc. LRS, of course. Nicole, I see you have your. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say one more. Also, our LGEs. So our DD directors and our LGEs should know some of the families and the participants and be able to make some recommendations and outreach.
Nicole?
I was going to say, FHFs, we can share it. I'm also on SEEP, and we can have that added to the agenda to have it spread out that way. And then also when we do that, if we're looking at youth and if they're youth in high school, we would need to think about if we're on having them on committee, we need to look at scheduling, our meetings, committee meetings, just outside of school hours then.
Thank you. And Jill?
We should reach out to Miss Thomas because she has an alumni database for partners and so and I know partners has parents with obviously youth. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, we could utilize the DD Council's currently existing network, which is mostly comprised of parents, to reach the youth through the parents. I mean, that's a built-in resource right there.
No.
Bambi, is your hand raised like currently, or was it just up from earlier? Okay. Any other comments, ideas, thoughts?
I'm trying to minimize the wrong screen.
All right, so it's about 11. I think this meeting was insanely productive, and I just wanted to say a big thank you to our committee members. I know we have a big task ahead, but I think, like I said, we have a great group. And if we just keep, having the youth in the forefront of our efforts in mind, and also, being excited about the fact that we get to recreate an incredible program for like an incredible cause, I think we're going to be all right. So thank you guys again. And let's see, is there any public comment before we close? All right. I don't see any.
Thank you, Lillian, for everything.
Well, thank you, Jill. I'm happy that you're here. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion. Bambi.
Thank you. And then a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Jill. Well, we just had our second YLF committee meeting. Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Lillian. Thank you, everybody.
I gotta be part of the meeting
Thanks, Dylan.
anytime.